MRI scanners are like very complicated digital cameras. And just in the same way as you can adjust, let's say, the aperture and shutter speed or film speed in a normal digital camera, on an MRI scanner there are hundreds of parameters you can change. And just like your ordinary camera, if you change these parameters, you change the intensity of the picture or the contrast. It's the same for the MRI scanner. So the challenge is, how can we make sure that different makes and models of scanner in different centres are all collecting the data in the same way? And a similar challenge goes for the way those data are then subsequently analysed to produce the liver iron concentration. There are several different methods of analysing the data, and we need to make sure that we standardise a method in order to get a reproducible result. Given these challenges, any particular technique needs to be validated. And what we mean by that is that the calibration that relates the MRI measured parameter, which might be something like T2 star or R2 or various other parameters, we need to make sure that the calibration that relates that measurement to liver iron concentration is reproducible. In other words, if we calibrate a certain scanner with a certain technique of data acquisition and data analysis, we need to make sure that if we transfer that to another scanner, that the same calibration is valid. If it's not valid, then we get a bias in our results. So validation requires testing the technique in independent cohorts of subjects on different scanners from the original scanners and patients where the calibration was made. It turns out that very few techniques have been through this process. Many that have failed that test because it's so easy for calibrations to drift. But I'm pleased to say that FerriScan is a particular technique that has passed that test and has been validated on multiple makes and models of scanner and in different cohorts of patients. Some of the key advantages of using FerriScan for liver iron concentration measurement are that it is standardized across all centers, ensuring that the results that are produced can be compared between centers and also can be used against thresholds mentioned in clinical guidelines. The technique is also regulated by authorities such as the FDA in the United States, CE mark in Europe and TGA in Australia and so on. It also has a very large dynamic range, which means that measurements can be made across all liver iron concentrations encountered in clinical practice. There's no upper limit that cannot be reached, unlike some other techniques. And finally, it can also be used in a range of patients, for example, including very young children or frail patients that may have difficulty in holding their breath, which is required for many MRI techniques. With FerriScan, the patient is able to breathe freely during the data acquisition. So those are some of the advantages of using the FerriScan technique.